The cipher had been broken at the 4th hour, and the page was still warm under his hand. Veshen Tor of the Halvik Compact Embassy on Sendris read the line a second time, very slowly, as if the act of reading it again might persuade it to mean something less. It did not. The Trell Suzerainty's military code, the one the cryptography desk in the cellar of the embassy had been worrying at for 19 months without a clean break, had at 4 hours past local midnight given up 2 words and a time. Veshen had been at his small desk in the Chancery's 3rd room with the lamp turned low and the cold cup at his elbow. The cipher clerk, Eris Penn, had come up the back stair with the sheet still trembling in her hand, and she had set it on his desk without speaking, and she had stood with her hand on the doorframe and waited. Veshen had read it once. He had read it a second time. He had looked at Eris Penn, and Eris Penn had looked back at him, and neither of them had spoken for the count of 3 slow breaths. The line on the sheet, in Eris's small, clean transliteration hand, read, Trell Suzerainty, High Command to Forward Elements, Frame 9, at dawn. Beneath the line, in pencil, in her own small annotation, she had written, I have run it 3 times. The handshake is good. The day marker is tomorrow. Veshen set the sheet flat. He drew the lamp closer. He read the line a 3rd time, and the 3rd time did not change it. The handshake was the Trell 9th rotation military handshake. And the handshake was good. And tomorrow was the 15th day of the local month of Karva, and Frame 9 was the long, shallow basin of empty space at the inner edge of the Concordant defensive perimeter, where the Halvik Concordant fleet, 471 warships of the Concord under Admiral Carvan Olm, lay at anchor in standard guard rotation under a peace they had been told for 3 years was holding. The Trell were going to attack the Concordant fleet at dawn. The Trell were going to attack at dawn, and the Concordant fleet did not know. Veshen Tor sat at his small desk in the Chancery's 3rd room, with the lamp turned low, and the cold cup at his elbow, and the sheet flat under his hand, and his 9-fingered hands, the inner fingers folded, the outer 2 laid lightly along the desk's edge, and he did not, in the next slow count of breaths, move. Eris Penn, in the doorway, did not move either. Outside the Chancery window, the curfew lamps of Sendris's diplomatic quarter burned low along the colonnade, and the rain that had been falling since the 11th hour was thinning to a fine, cold mist, and the night was very quiet, and the Trell were going to attack the Concordant fleet at dawn, and the Concordant fleet did not know. Eris, Veshen said, Izir, how long? From this room to the long-range transmitter at the Chancery's roof. 3 minutes, sir, if it is warm. 23, if it is cold. Is it cold? It is cold, sir. We have not warmed it since the 7th of Karva. The ambassador's order. Veshen closed his outer fingers, slowly, against the desk's edge. The Trell were going to attack at dawn. Dawn at Frame 9, by the Concordant tables, was 4 hours and 17 minutes from the moment he had read the line. The Chancery's long-range transmitter, if warmed, would carry his voice in clear from Sendris to the Halvik relay at the Voss Ark in 11 minutes. From the Voss Ark to the Concordant flagship Lumen at Frame 9, by the Concordant tables, was a further 27 minutes on the long band. 11 and 27 was 38. 23 to warm the transmitter, and 38 on the wire was an hour and 1 minute, which left him 3 hours and 16 minutes to make Admiral Carvan Olm believe him, to make him weigh the source, to make him give the order to move 471 warships out of standard guard rotation and into pre-action stations before the first Trell hull crossed the inner perimeter of Frame 9 at dawn. It could be done. It would not be done by him from this desk on this neutral world. The ambassador's standing order, in writing, in his own seal, on the 6th of Karva, was that no clear language transmission was to leave the embassy roof without his countersignature, and the ambassador was 800 kilometers west, at the summer residence at Kelvar, on his 2nd week of remembrance leave. His only secure link down 8 days for cable maintenance, he had not asked to be repaired. He thought of waking the Chancery's deputy. The deputy was 12 minutes away on foot, careful. 11 years on Sendris. and had never once in those 11 years countersigned a clear language transmission without first consulting the ambassador. He thought of the Sendris ground line to the Halvik consulate at Mervek. The ground line was public. The Trell embassy, 2 streets east, ran a passive intercept on the city's ground lines as a matter of course. To send the line on the ground was to send it to the Trell. He thought of the courier station. The courier station of the Halvik Compact, at the end of the diplomatic quarter's eastern lane, had 3 ships, 3 pilots, and a single dispatcher. Its ships were fast, and by the Sendris Convention, inviolable hulls could not be searched. Flight plans could not be inspected. Passage could not be impeded by any power on the world. The dispatcher, by standing order in the ambassador's name, was empowered to launch a single ship to the Voss Ark with a sealed dispatch on the request of any attaché upon presentation of the attaché's seal. Veshen Tor had his seal in the inner pocket of his coat. He stood up. "Aris," he said, "take the sheet. Make me 3 clean copies. 2 by hand, 1 on the type wheel. Seal each in a compact formal courier envelope. Address them. Concordant Flagship Lumen, by hand of Admiral Carvin Olm. Urgent Personal, by hand of Halvik Voss Ark Relay. Bring them to me at the courier station as fast as you can carry them. Do not use the back stair. Do not pass the residence. Take the cellar corridor, and come out by the consular garden gate." "Yes, sir." "Aris." "Sir, if anyone stops you on the colonnade, you are carrying my night drafts to the courier for the morning bag. Nothing else." "Yes, sir." "Go." Aris Penn went. She took the sheet. She took the lamp from the desk corner. She took the cellar key off the small hook by the door. She did not speak. She went down the back stair, very fast, very quiet, and the soft sound of her shoes faded along the cellar corridor, and Veshen Tor stood alone in the Chancery's 3rd room, with the lamp turned low and the cold cup at his elbow, and the warm pencil annotation in his head, and the 4 hours and 17 minutes ticking against the inside of his skull, like a small, slow second hand. He picked up his coat. He buttoned it. He set his seal in the inner breast pocket, against his ribs, where he could feel it. He took the small gray woolen scarf from the back of his chair and wound it once around his throat. He turned the lamp out. He went down the front stair. In the Chancery's outer hall, the night porter, an old Sendrisi man named Pell, who had worked the door for 40 years, and who slept upright in the small box behind the umbrella stand, was awake. Pell looked up. Pell did not, in 40 years, speak unless spoken to. "Pell, sir, I am going to the courier station for an hour. If the deputy or the ambassador or anyone else asks for me, I am at the courier station. I will be back before the 5th hour." "Yes, sir." "Good night, Pell." "Good night, sir." Veshen Tor went out into the colonnade. The mist had thinned to a fine, cold haze, and the curfew lamps were burning low, and the long line of consular fronts along the western side of the diplomatic quarter were dark behind their shuttered windows. He turned right, away from the residence, and went east along the colonnade past the 7 other missions, past the Trell embassy with its single lamp burning above its high black door, past the Mervek consulate, past the long blank wall of the old library that had been a chapel before the Sendris Convention had pulled all places of worship out of the diplomatic quarter. And at the end of the colonnade, he turned right again, into the eastern lane, and walked the 400 meters past the consular gardens to the low building at the end, where the small lamp above the door read, in cut brass, "Courier Station of the Halvik Compact." The dispatcher was a Halvik woman named Drest Valen, 23 years in service, who slept in the small back room of the station because she lived nowhere else. The bell over the door rang once when Veshen came in, and Drest Valen came out of the back room in her uniform tunic, unbuttoned at the throat, and she stopped when she saw him. "Sir," she said, "I need a ship to the Voss Ark, 1 sealed dispatch. The dispatch is coming. It will be here inside the quarter hour. I want the pilot warm and the ship lit on my seal." I am not going to wait for the ambassador's countersignature. Dressed Violin did not, in the count of one breath, react. Then she said, "On your seal, sir. On my seal." Veshin took the seal from the inner breast pocket of his coat. He set it on the high counter between them. "On my seal. Today. Now. The dispatch goes to the concordant flagship Lumen at Frame 9. By hand of Admiral Carvin Olm. The flight clearance is filed under the Sendris Convention Article 11 Inviolability. Pilot 3 takes it. He flies straight. He does not break for any signal short of an act of war." Dressed, Violin looked at the seal. She looked at Vishen. She did not, for the count of 2 breaths, speak. Then she lifted the seal in her 4 fingers, very lightly, very carefully, and she pressed it to the night log, and she said, "On your seal, sir. Pilot 3 is asleep in the bunk room. He will be at the ship in 8 minutes. The Reach 3 takes 19 minutes to warm. The dispatch had better be here at the half hour, or it will not save itself any minutes by being early. It will be here." "Yes, sir." Dressed. "Sir, you will, when this is done, find yourself before a board of inquiry. I am writing you a note now, in my own hand, that says I gave you the order on my own authority, and that you complied under standing instructions. Sign nothing about this in the morning until I or the ambassador have spoken to you first. Understand?" "I understand, sir." He took the small notepad from the counter and the small steel pen from her tunic pocket, and he wrote the note in his own hand, in 3 lines, dated and timed. And he signed it, Veshin Tor, 3rd Attaché, Halvik Compact Embassy, Sendris, 4th hour 21 minutes. The 15th of Karva. He blotted it. He folded it. He gave it to her. She put it in the inner pocket of her tunic. "Pilot 3, she said. She turned to the back room and rang the small wall bell 3 times, and then once, and then 3 times again. The bell echoed in the small, low corridor, and a moment later, a young Halvik pilot in his off-duty gray came out into the corridor, with his hair still flat against the side of his head from the bunk pillow, and his boots in his pervises. "Hand. Maris." Dressed Valen said. "Reach 3. Warm her now." The Voss Arc. Sealed dispatch from the 3rd Attaché. Inviolability filing under the Sendris Convention Article 11. You leave on the half hour. "Yes, ma'am." Maris. "Ma'am. Straight line. Do not break for any short signal. If anything tries to stop you that is not a Halvik flag, you tell them the convention by name and the article by number, and you keep going. If they fire you, keep going. If they board you, destroy the dispatch in the burn box and you tell them nothing." "Yes, ma'am." Pilot 3 Maris pulled on his boots. He did not speak again. He went out the back door of the station, and across the small lit pad, to the long, thin gray shape of the Reach 3 on its cradle, with the small running lamp on its nose blinking once a second, and the cradle hands unlocked themselves at his approach, and the Reach 3 came alive under his hand in the dim, warm hum of an engine that had not been cold for very long. Veshin Tor stood at the counter of the courier station with his coat buttoned, and his scarf at his throat, and the small, warm weight of his seal back in his inner pocket, and the 4 hours and 10 minutes ticking against the inside of his skull. And he waited for Eris Penn to come up the eastern lane with the 3 sealed envelopes and the warm pencil annotation that said the day marker was tomorrow. She came at the 11 minutes past 4 with the envelopes in her hand and the lamp out and the cellar key still in her tunic pocket, and she did not stop running until she was inside the door of the courier station. And Dressed Violin took the envelopes from her without a word, and carried them out across the pad to the warm gray shape of the Reach 3, and put them in Pilot 3 Maris's hand through the open side hatch. Pilot 3 Maris took the envelopes. He set them in the dispatch box at his right knee. He closed the box. He sealed it. He looked once at Dressed Valen. "On the half hour," he said. "On the half hour," she said. "Straight line. Voss Arc." "Yes, ma'am." The side hatch closed. The cradle hands released. The Reach 3 lifted. She went up off the pad in the slow, soft hum of her warmed engine, with her running lamp blinking once a second on the nose, and she cleared the lower lamps of the diplomatic quarter, and she banked east over the consular gardens, and she climbed into the thinning mist over Sendris, and at the 4 hours and 31 minutes, she crossed the orbital boundary into open space, with her inviolability filing on the long band, and her course set on the Voss arc. And she went, and she went, and she did not slow. Veshan Tor stood at the door of the courier station with dressed Valen at his shoulder and Aris Pen behind them in the doorway, and the cold mist of Sendris on his face, and he watched the small, fading lamp of the Reach 3 rise and rise and rise into the dark, and become a small, slow blink against the high overcast, and then become nothing. And then he turned and walked back along the eastern lane and the colonnade, with the 4 hours and 38 minutes ticking against his skull, and the warm pencil annotation in his head, and the small, slow second hand of the dawn, beginning at last to move. He did not know, as he walked back to the Chancery, that the Reach 3's inviolability filing had been logged at the Sendris Orbital Control Station at the 4 hours and 33 minutes, and that the Sendris Orbital Control Station, in standard practice, by routine, by the dull mechanism of bureaucracy, and not by the design of any one mind, copied the filings of all inviolability flights, including the carrier and the destination, to a long passive band that any sufficiently patient listener in the Sendris system could read at leisure. He did not know that the Trell Embassy on Sendris, 2 streets east of the Chancery's outer wall, ran a passive intercept on the long passive band of the Sendris Orbital Control Station as a matter of course. He did not know that the Trell commercial attaché, who was not a commercial attaché, was awake at his small desk on the 2nd floor of the Trell Embassy at the 4 hours and 34 minutes, and that the Trell commercial attaché read the filing at the 4 hours and 35 minutes, and that the Trell commercial attaché did not, in the next count of 3 breaths, move. The Trell commercial attaché read the filing a second time. Then he stood up, and he walked to the small back door of the Trell Embassy. And he went down a flight of stairs into the cellar. And he opened a small steel door at the end of a short corridor. And he keyed a sequence on a small steel console. And he sent on a short tight burst, on a frequency that was not the long band, and not the ground line, and not any frequency that any chancery in the Sendris diplomatic quarter had ever logged as Trell. A single coded line to the forward elements of the Trell suzerainty at the inner edge of frame 9. The line read, in the Trell Day cipher, Halvik courier out of Sendris, for Voss arc at 4:31. Run intercept. Run intercept. Then he keyed the console dark. He climbed the stairs. He went back to his small desk on the 2nd floor. He sat. He folded his 8 long fingers, slowly, on the desk's surface. And he waited for the answer from the forward elements. And the answer, in the close band, came in the dry voice of a Trell strike leader 19 minutes later. In a single word. And the single word was, acknowledged. The Trell commercial attaché unfolded his fingers. He poured himself a small cup of the bitter southern tea that he drank on cold nights. He drank it. He did not, for the count of the next hour, move from his desk. Across 2 streets, in the 3rd room of the Halvik Chancery, Veshan Tor sat at his small desk with the lamp turned low again, and the cold cup at his elbow, and the 4 hours and 47 minutes ticking against the inside of his skull. And he did not know. Aris Pen brought him a fresh cup of the Chancery's bitter tea at 5. They sat, for the count of an hour, in the dim warm of the Chancery's 3rd room, with the lamp turned low, and the cold mist thinning into a cold gray dawn outside the shuttered window. At 6, the long band relay at the Chancery roof, finally warmed by Aris Pen against the order of the ambassador, in defiance of the ambassador's seal, at the 3rd attaché's instruction, came online with its low blue indicator, and Veshan Tor went up the back stair to the roof room with the 4th clean copy of the line in his hand, and he sat at the relay desk, and he keyed open the long band channel to the Halvik Voss arc, and he opened his mouth to speak the line in clear. And the long band channel did not, when he keyed it, return a carrier. He keyed it again. It did not return. He sat for a count of 3 breaths with his 9-fingered hand on the key. and then he understood what he was looking at. And the understanding went down through him like a cold, thin wire. And he stood up. "Aris," he said. He did not raise his voice. "The long band is jammed." Aris Penn, at the small monitor desk by the door of the roof room, looked up. She looked at the indicator on the long band carrier monitor. The indicator, which should have been a slow, soft green, was a hard, flat amber. "Jammed," she said. "From the Trell Embassy." "Yes, sir. There is nothing to be done about it from here. The Trell will hold the jam through the dawn. If we move on it, we make a public incident, and the Sendris Council will close the Chancery for the duration of any inquiry. We cannot move on it. The Reach 3 is out. Pilot 3, Maris, carries the dispatch on his own engine, and his own seal, and his own inviolability filing, and his own hand. He will arrive at the Voss Ark at 5 hours 50 from the launch, by the standard plot, which is 9 minutes before the dawn at frame 9. The Voss Ark relay will hand the dispatch to the concordant flagship Lumen at the dawn plus 18, which is 18 minutes too late. Sird, unless Pilot 3 Maris flies a faster plot than the standard, he may. He is a good pilot. He may shave 4 minutes. He may shave 6. He cannot shave 18. Sird, it is in his hand, Aris. There is nothing more we can do from this roof. Yes, sir. Vashan Tor stood at the long band desk in the roof room of the Halvik Chancery on Sendris, with his 9-fingered hand on a key that did not return a carrier, and the 4th clean copy of the line in his other hand, and the cold, gray dawn rising over the diplomatic quarter outside the roof window. And he understood, for the first time in his 19 years of service to the Halvik Compact, what it was to have done his work, and to have done it well, and to have done it in time, and to have failed. Pilot 3 Maris flew the Reach 3 out of Sendris orbit at 4 hours and 31 on the standard plot, and at 4 hours and 38 he understood that he could not afford the standard plot. Dressed Valen had given him eyes over the dispatch box that she had not given him in 19 years. He set the close plot at 4 hours and 40. The close plot ran through the inner edge of the Sendris debris ring. A band of broken stone and old satellite ice drifted in from the third moon, when it had cracked 900 years ago, that no civilian or diplomatic pilot had legally entered since the convention. It was 11 minutes faster than the standard plot. It was, by every Halvik courier flight manual, lethal above 1/3 standard. He took the Reach 3 to 2/3 standard. He fed the close plot through the navigation console at 5 hours and 1, and confirmed past 3 red warnings. The console accepted the plot. The Reach 3 banked hard right at 5 hours and 4, and crossed the inner edge of the ring, and Pilot 3 Maris put both his hands on the yoke, and his eyes on the forward viewport, and the inner edge of the ring opened around him, like a long, slow, rough mouth, full of broken teeth, and he flew. He flew for the next 43 minutes through the ring, with his eyes on the forward viewport, and his hands on the yoke, and the proximity alarm singing low and steady at his left elbow, and old satellite fragments breaking against the Reach 3's forward shielding in small bright flashes, the hull soaked without complaint. He did not, in 43 minutes, look away from the viewport. The fragments came. The fragments went. The shielding held. The close plot ran out at 5 hours and 47 at the outer edge of the ring, and he brought the Reach 3 back to the standard lane 4 minutes before the Voss Ark came up in his viewport, and he had cut 9 minutes from the standard plot clean, and he had brought the dispatch and himself out of the ring alive. He did not, when the Voss Ark came up, allow himself to feel anything about the 9 minutes. He keyed the Voss Ark on the close band, filed his arrival, requested immediate relay to the concordant flagship Lumen at frame 9. Sealed dispatch. Hand of Admiral Carvan Olm. Urgent personal, under Article 11, inviolability. The Voss Ark duty officer, a Halvik relay master named Pel Corvain, took the request at 5 hours and 48. He set the relay running at 49. The relay handed the dispatch to a long flat null at the frame 9 carrier band, and Pel Corvain, looking at the null, understood at once. He keyed the close band. Maris. Frame 9 is jammed. Hard jam. The whole carrier. Trell signature. The lumen will not hear us on any wavelength. The Voss arc can throw. Pilot 3 Maris closed his eyes for the count of one breath. Corvain. The closest Halvik flag to the lumen, on a free band. Stand by. Pel Corvain keyed the longboard. Read it twice. Patrol Corvette Brendis. Outer edge of frame 9. On close band rotation. 21 minutes from the lumen by her own engines. She can take tight band from us in 4. But the Brendis is not under my command. Her watch at 5:53 is the slack watch. There is no klaxon for a tight band incoming on the slack watch. Then wake her. Burn the Voss arc emergency band. Maris. The emergency band wakes every ship in the sector. The Trell are not asleep. If I burn it, they will know the warning is out, and they will move the dawn forward. Pilot 3 Maris sat in his cockpit with the dispatch box at his knee, and the long, flat null of the Trell jam in his earpiece, and the small, bright second hand of the dawn going past 6. And he did not. For 3 breaths. Speak. Corvain. Burn it. You are giving me the order. On my seal as a Halvik courier under Article 11, I am giving you the order. Burn the close band watch frequency of the Brendis. Wake her. Pass the dispatch on tight band. Let the Trell hear. The Concordant fleet does not get this warning in time on any other plot. Write a note in your own hand, for the board afterward, that I gave the order, that you complied under standing instructions. Sign nothing else until I have spoken to you. Now, Pel Corvain burned the Voss arc emergency band on the close band watch frequency of the patrol corvette Brendis at 6 hours and 1 minute. The Brendis came awake at 6 hours and 1 and 12 seconds, with a klaxon so loud the third watch helm officer, 2 steps left of the console, set his hand on the close quarters battery firing key by reflex, and only by 9 years of concordant training did not pull it. Halvis Tren, 3rd Watch Junior Lieutenant, keyed back. Pel Corvain read the order out inviolable courier dispatch from Sendris, sealed, hand of Admiral Olm, frame 9, under hard jam, Brendis, to walk it in on her own engines. Halvis Tren did not, in the count of 1 breath, ask whether it was legal or authentic. He opened the tight band. Voss arc, Brendis. Acknowledged. Send. The dispatch came across the tight band in 4 minutes. Halvis Tren read it once on the tight band as it came across. He stopped reading after the second word. He keyed the bridge intercom. Captain to the bridge. Inviolable dispatch from Voss arc, hand of Admiral Olm. Urgent, personal. Commander Selvi Draka came through the bridge hatch in 2 minutes, in her tunic unbuttoned at the throat. The long, thin scar at her left cheekbone from the Vela arc. Action dark in the low blue light. Halvis Tren read the dispatch. She did not, for 1 breath, speak. Then she set her hand on the helm officer's shoulder. Bring her about. Full close band thrust. The lumen. Best plot. We are walking a hand dispatch in to Admiral Olm. Comms open close band to the lumen the moment we are inside 200 kilometers. If the Trell jam is still up, we read it across by my voice. Tren note in your own hand for the board afterward. Hand it to me before the morning watch. Well done. Aya, Mom. The patrol corvette Brendis, 614 meters of long, thin concordant cutter on close band rotation at the outer edge of frame 9, came about at 6 hours and 7 minutes under the hand of Commander Selve Draka, and she burned for the long, dim shape of the concordant flagship lumen at the heart of the concordant guard rotation under full close band thrust. And the close band plot ran to 21 minutes, and the dawn at frame 9, by the concordant tables, was at 6 hours and 42. And Commander Selve Draka, 2-line, standing at the chart table with her tunic still unbuttoned at the throat, and the dispatch, on the chart table, flat under her hand, watched the close band plot run, and the close band plot ran, and the close band plot ran, and the small, bright second hand of the dawn went on against the inside of her skull. She closed her tunic at the throat, at 6 hours and 28 minutes. She did not, in the next count of breaths, allow herself to think anything beyond the close-band plot. Across 2,400 kilometers of Frame 9, in the deep, warm dim of the long bridge of the Concordant flagship Lumen, Admiral Carvin Olm of the Halvik Concordant Fleet sat in the high-backed flag chair at the chart well with his second cup of the morning tea in his left hand, and his right hand laid lightly on the cover of the flag log. And he did not know. He was 81 years old. He had served the Concorde for 58 years, and had stood at 3 Trell incursions. He had written, in the year of his confirmation as Admiral, 3 short lines in the long flag log that the senior officers of the Concorde still quoted at promotion boards. Readiness is not a posture. Readiness is the habit of the hand. The hand that has been kept on the hilt does not have to find it. The bridge was in standard guard rotation. It had been so for 14 months, by vote of the Concordant Council in formal session, 47-14, that the 3-year peace with the Trell suzerainty was holding. Admiral Carvin Olm had voted, in his advisory capacity, against the reduction. He had been overridden. He had complied. He had, in those 14 months, written 1 short line in his private log every night before he slept. The hand is on the hilt. He had written it the night before, this one at the 11th hour and 40. This morning, at 6 hours and 29, with the second cup of the morning tea in his left hand, and his right hand lightly on the cover of the flag log and the bridge, warming under the morning shift, and the standard guard rotation in standard time, he set the cup down, very lightly, on the small ring of cup stains on the corner of the chart well where his cup had sat at this hour for 14 months, and he looked up at the long flat board of the Frame 9 carrier band, and he saw, on the long flat board, that the Frame 9 carrier band, which had been a slow, soft green for 14 months, was a hard, flat amber. He did not, in the count of 1 breath, speak. Then he stood up. Communications. Sir. The long band is jammed. Sir. Confirmed. Trell signature. The jam came on at 5 hours and 49. We have been on close band rotation since. No incoming traffic on the long band. No outgoing. Why was I not informed? Sir. Standing Order 311. Jam reports under 1 hour duration on the close band rotation are logged to the watch officer for morning brief. The watch officer logged it at 5 hours and 49. The morning brief is at 6 hours and 35. Standing Order 311. Sir. Admiral Carvin Olm looked at the long flat board for the count of 2 breaths. He looked at the standard guard rotation for the count of 1 more. He did not, in the count of those 3 breaths, raise his voice. He turned to the flag captain, a concordant commander named Aris Vendel, who had been at his right hand for 9 years, and he said, in the dry, quiet voice that the senior officers of the Concorde had learned, in the long years of his command, to recognize as the voice that did not require a second telling. Vendel. Bring the fleet up to action stations. All hulls. All decks. Now. By my voice. By my mouth. By my hand on the order. I do not have it in writing. I will sign it after. Move. Aris Vendel did not, in the count of 1 breath, ask why. He turned to the long flat board. He keyed the action station's klaxon on every hull in Frame 9. The klaxon went out across the close band carrier, in the long dry tone that the 471 warships of the Concorde had been trained, in the deep habit of 19 years of fleet drill, to answer without question. And the close band carrier went, in the count of 9 seconds, from the slow, soft hum of standard guard rotation to the long, hard ring of full action. The fleet came up. It came up at 6 hours and 30. The dawn was at 6 hours and 42. It came up 12 minutes ahead of the dawn at Frame 9, on the hand of an admiral who had read a flat amber indicator at 6 hours and 29, and who had not waited for the morning brief. It came up 6 minutes too late. The Trell forward elements crossed the inner perimeter of Frame 9 at 6 hours and 36, 6 minutes before the standard dawn, on the close band burst that the Trell commercial attaché at Sendris had sent at 4 hours and 35 from the cellar of the Trell embassy, and the Trell forward elements came in heavy, 294 hulls in the first wave, on a vector that the Trell strike leader had been holding for 19 days against the standing order of his own high command, awaiting only the close-band burst that said the warning was out and the dawn must be moved forward. And the Trell strike leader, when the burst had come at 4 hours and 35, had moved the dawn forward by 6 minutes, and at 6 hours and 36, the Trell first wave hit the inner perimeter of Frame 9 at full burn, and the Concordant fleet, 6 minutes into a bring-up that should have had it 12 minutes done, met the Trell first wave at the inner perimeter with 311 of its hulls. Still 7 minutes from station, and the long band still jammed, and the morning brief still 5 minutes from its hour. Admiral Carvon Olm stood at the chart well of the long bridge of the Concordant flagship Lumen, with his hand on the cover of the flag log and the second cup of the morning tea, cold on the small ring of cup stains at the corner of the well, and the long flat board of the Frame 9 carrier band, hard flat amber, under the long thin column of the Trell first wave returns, coming up red on the close band plot, and he watched, in the count of 3 breaths, the inner perimeter of Frame 9 break against the Trell first wave, and he did not, in the count of those 3 breaths, allow himself to think anything beyond the close band orders that were coming out of his mouth. Vendel. The Lumen takes the second wave bracket. All forward batteries free. Tight band signal to the second and third squadrons to fall back to the inner reserve line and reform on the Lumen. The first squadron holds the breach with what it has. The Trell second wave will come up on the burn of the first. Hold the second wave until the third squadron is reformed. Then we move. ATA. Aye. Sir. Communications. Voss arc. By close band, by long wire, by tight band, by any frequency that the Trell jam is not on. Hand of Admiral Olm. 3 words. Warning received late. Send. Aye. Sir. Vendel. Sir. Where did the warning come from? Sir. By the patrol corvette Brendis. By close band. By the hand of Commander Selvdraka, who took it on tight band from the Voss Arc Relay Master Pel Corvain at 5 hours and 53. Who took it on the emergency band from a Halvik courier, Pilot 3 Maris, who flew it out of Sendris orbit at 4 hours and 31 on a sealed, inviolable dispatch from a third attaché of the Halvik Compact Embassy on Sendris by the name of Vashan Tor on his own seal, against the standing order of his ambassador, at 4 hours and 21 of this morning, on a cipher that the embassy cryptography desk had broken at the 4th hour. Admiral Carvon Olm looked at the close band plot for the count of 1 breath. He looked at Aris Vendel for the count of 1 more. He said, in the dry, quiet voice that did not require a second telling, Vendel, after this morning, you will draft a citation in my hand for the third attaché Vashan Tor of the Halvik Compact Embassy on Sendris, for the courier Pilot 3 Maris of the Halvik Courier Service on Sendris, for the Voss Arc Relay Master Pel Corvain, for the Commander Selvdraka of the Patrol Corvette Brendis, and for the Junior Lieutenant Halvis Tren of the Close Band Watch of the Patrol Corvette Brendis. The citation will read, This officer's hand kept the warning on the wire when every order they had been given said to set it down. You will draft it before you sleep tonight. I will sign it. The Concorde will hear of these 5 names, whether the Concorde wishes to or not. Aye, sir. Now the Lumen does her work. Aye, sir. The Concordant flagship Lumen was a Verity-class dreadnought of the Halvik Concorde, 2,400 meters along the spine, with 11 of her 17 primary lance ports, still bearing the scorch marks of an old incursion under heavy lacquer. She came up to action at 6 hours and 30 under the hand of Admiral Carvon Olm, and her 17 primary lances warmed in the long, slow blue burn that the gunnery crews of the Lumen, on the long drill rotations of 19 years, had been trained to bring to full charge inside the count of 3 minutes. At 6 hours and 33, her primary lances were full. At 6 hours and 36, when the Trell first wave hit the inner perimeter of Frame 9, the Lumen's primary lances were the only 17 concordant primary lances at Frame 9 that were already at full charge. because the admiral had given the bring-up order 6 minutes before the dawn, and the Lumen, alone among the 471 concordant warships in standard guard rotation, had finished her primary warm at the count. The Trell's second wave came up on the burn of the first at 6 hours and 41, 317 hulls under the third-rank strike leader Kel Sarvis, in the high command chair of the Trell flagship, Verkavar. He had stood at the inner perimeter 19 days awaiting the close-band burst. He had at 4 hours and 35 received it from the Sendris attaché and moved the dawn forward 6 minutes. He saw, at 6 hours and 41, in the close-band returns, that the Concordant fleet was not in standard guard. It was at half-action 311 of its hulls 7 minutes from the line. But it was at action. And the Lumen, at the heart of the guard line, was at full action, her 17 primary lances in the long, slow blue burn of full charge. And the long, slow blue burn on the close-band returns was a thing that Kel Sarvis had been trained in 18 years of service to recognize at first sight and to fear. He did not, in the count of one breath, allow himself to fear. He keyed the long command band and gave the order to engage. The Trell's second wave engaged at 6 hours and 42. The dawn at frame 9 was at 6 hours and 42. The Concordant flagship Lumen fired her 17 primary lances at the heart of the Trell's second wave bracket at 6 hours and 42 and 1/2 second, on the long, slow blue burn of the full charge, in the close, tight pattern that the Concordant gunnery school had taught at the Voss yards for 41 years, with the 17 lances braided into a single, long, thin column of light that crossed the 240 kilometers between the Lumen and the Verkavar in 9/10 of a second, and the long, thin column of light went through the long, heavy hull of the Trell flagship Verkavar without slowing, and the Verkavar, in the count of one further breath, did not exist. The two Trell heavy cruisers on the flank of the Verkavar went in the second beat. The Trell strike leader Kel Sarvis was already gone before he understood what had answered him. The Trell's second wave broke against the long, slow blue burn of the Lumen's lances at 6 hours and 43. The Trell first wave, 294 hulls already inside the inner perimeter, came on. The first wave came on hard. The first wave killed 87 Concordant hulls in the next 11 minutes, because the Concordant First Squadron, on the breach with what it had, was 311 hulls short of the line, and the first wave's heavy batteries, in those 11 minutes, walked through the Concordant First Squadron like a hard hand walking through dry stalks. The Concorde lost the cruisers Eschwell and Marvin between 6 hours and 45 and 48. The Concorde lost the frigates Pell, Vorask, Mervek, Drest, Valen, and Corvain in the count of 2 minutes between 6 hours and 50 and 52. The Concorde lost the destroyer Veshan Tor, a hull named by long accident of the Concordant order for an old admiral of the second Trell incursion, at 6 hours and 53 with all 78 aboard. The Concorde lost the heavy frigate Olm Carvan, named for the admiral's grandfather, at 6 hours and 55. The Concorde lost, in those 11 minutes, 87 hulls. The admiral did not, in those 11 minutes, take his hand off the cover of the flag log. He gave the orders that reformed the second and third squadrons on the Lumen at 6 hours and 55. 4 minutes before the close band plot had said they could reform, because the long, hard fire of the Lumen's lances at the heart of the Trell's second wave had bought the second and third squadrons, the 4 minutes, by killing the Trell, strike leader, and the long command band of the second wave. And Warg, the coordinating cruisers that the second wave had depended on for its braided fire, and the second and third squadrons came up on the Lumen's port and starboard flanks at 6 hours and 55, with their primary lances at the long, slow blue burn of the full charge, and the Concordant fleet at frame 9, on the hand of an admiral who had ordered the bring-up at the flat amber indicator at 6 hours and 29, without waiting for the morning brief, met the Trell first wave at the inner perimeter at 6 hours and 56 in full Concordant action. With the long, slow blue burn of 283 primary lances on the close band plot, and the long, slow blue burn of 283 Concordant primary lances at full charge on the close band plot, was a thing that the Trell first wave strike officers, in the count of 3 breaths, did not have an answer for. The Trell first wave broke at 7 hours and 4. The Trell forward elements began their retreat at 7 hours and 6. The retreat was not orderly. The retreat lost the Trell heavy cruisers, Verthan, Drask, and Olvanar, between 7 hours and 8 and 11 to the long pursuit batteries of the Lumen, the dreadnought Carvis, and the battery cruiser, Mev. It lost the strike carriers Selvanar and Carvanar between 7 hours and 12 and 15 to the Verity pattern squadrons off the Lumen's flag hangars. Of the 611 Trell hulls that had crossed the inner perimeter at 6 hours and 36, 200 returned to the Carvon moon by the count of the morning. The Concorde, by the count of the long morning, had lost 87 hulls. The Concorde, by the count of the long morning, had not lost the inner perimeter. The Concorde, by the count of the long morning, had not lost the Lumen. The Concorde, by the count of the long morning, had not lost Frame 9. It had, however, lost the 87 hulls and the 8,411 concordant personnel aboard them. The names of the 8,411, in the long count of the next week, would be written in the long concordant flag log of the Concordant Fleet at Frame 9, in ink, in the hand of the flag captain Eris Vendel. On the standing order of Admiral Carvon Olm, on the principle of the line in the flag log that had been quoted at promotion boards for 19 years, readiness is not a posture. Readiness is the habit of the hand. The hand had been on the hilt. The hand had not had to find it. The hand had found it 6 minutes too late. The Admiral knew it. The flag captain knew it. The bridge knew it. The fleet knew it. The Concorde, in the count of the next week, would know it. The 8,411 would know nothing. Admiral Carvon Olm sat in the high-backed flag chair at the chart well of the long bridge of the concordant flagship Lumen at the long morning of the 15th of Carva, with the cold cup at the corner of the chart well and his right hand on the cover of the flag log and the long flat board of the Frame 9 carrier band, on which the Trell jam had at 7 hours and 7 minutes lifted, slow, soft green, and he did not, in the count of 3 breaths, speak. Then he said, in the dry, quiet voice, "Sir, find me the citation paper. Sir," and "Vendel, sir, the line on the citation will read exactly as I told you." This officer's hand kept the warning on the wire, when every order they had been given said to set it down. 5 names: Veshan Tor, Maris, Corvain, Draka, Tren, in that order. By the order in which the warning passed through their hands, Veshan Tor, at the top. He was the first hand. "Yes, sir. The Concorde will hear of these 5 names." "Yes, sir. Whether the Concorde wishes to, or not." "Yes, sir." Eris Vendel went to find the citation paper. The Admiral sat at the chart well with the cold cup at his elbow and his right hand on the cover of the flag log, and the long, slow blue burn of the Lumen's primary lances, cooling on the close band plot, and the long, thin column of the 2nd and 3rd squadrons reforming on the inner reserve line on the close band plot, and the long quiet of the long band. At last unjammed, returning slow, soft green on the long flat board, and he did not, in the next count of the long morning, look down. Across the long dark of Frame 9, on the patrol corvette Brendis, Commander Selv Draka sat in her day cabin with her tunic now buttoned at the throat, and the small note from Junior Lieutenant Halvis Tren flat under her hand, and the long, close band returns of the Concordant Fleet's full action, on the panel beside her. And she read the note once, and she read it a second time, and she signed it at the bottom in her own hand, in ink, and she set it in the small wire tray on the corner of her desk for the morning bag. She did not, in the next hour, allow herself to think anything beyond the close band returns. At the Voss Arc, the relay master Pel Corvain sat at the long band desk with his hand on the now quiet emergency band key and the note in his tunic pocket that said he had complied with the order of the Courier Pilot 3 Maris under his own standing instructions. And he watched, on the long flat board, The slow, soft green returned to the frame 9 carrier band at 7 hours and 7. And he did not, in the count of one breath, allow himself to feel anything about the slow, soft green. At Sendris orbit, on the small low pad of the courier station of the Halvik Compact, dressed Valen, of 23 years in service, stood at the open hatch of the Reach 3, returned at the 8 hours and 11 on the standard plot from the Voss Arc, with Pilot 3 Maris at the controls and the dispatch box at his right knee now empty, and she took the box from his hand without a word and set it in the bonded shelf. And she said, in the dry voice she used for orders that did not require a second telling, "Get warm, get fed, sleep in the bunk room. Do not leave the station. The board will come for both of us before the noon." "Yes, ma'am." Maris. "Ma'am. Well done." "Yes, ma'am." In the third room of the Halvik Chancery on Sendris, Veshentor sat at his small desk with the lamp turned out and the cold cup at his elbow, and the gray morning rising in the shuttered window, and the long thin sound of the bell on the chancery door at 8 hours and 20. Pell the night porter, on his last hour of the night watch, opened the door. The deputy of the chancery came in. The deputy was a careful man who had spent 11 years on Sendris, and who had not, in those 11 years, walked the colonnade at this hour without his hat. He was not wearing his hat. He was carrying, in his right hand, a flimsy of the standard concordant long band notification, which had at 7 hours and 12 minutes come through on the long band, at last unjammed, with the seal of the flag captain Eris Vendel of the concordant flagship Lumen, and the close band readout of the action at frame 9, and which had, at the second paragraph, named the third attaché Veshentor of the Halvik Compact Embassy on Sendris as the first hand on the warning chain. The deputy stood in the hall. He looked at Pell. He looked up the front stair. He went up the front stair to the third room. He knocked. He waited for the count of one breath. He opened the door. Veshentor was at the small desk. The lamp was out. The cold cup was at his elbow. The Chancery's bitter tea, in a fresh cup, that Eris Penn had brought him at 7 hours and 40, was untouched at the corner of the desk. His 9-fingered hands were on the desk's surface, the inner fingers folded, the outer 2 laid lightly along the edge, in the posture he had not moved from since the 7th hour. The deputy held out the flimsy. Veshentor did not, in the count of one breath, look up. Then he said, in the dry, quiet voice that the Chancery had not heard him use in 19 years, "Read it." The deputy read it. He read the second paragraph. He read the line that named the third attaché. He read the count of the concordant losses. He read the count of the Trell losses. He read the line at the bottom that named the patrol corvette Brendis, and the Voss Arc relay master, and the Halvik courier, and the Cipher clerk, and the third attaché. Then he read the last line, in the flat, formal voice that the Chancery used for citations, in which the flag captain Eris Vendel had written, in his own hand, on the standing order of Admiral Carvan Olm. This officer's hand kept the warning on the wire, when every order they had been given said to set it down. Veshentor closed his outer fingers, slowly, against the edge of the desk. He did not, in the count of 3 breaths, speak. Then he said, 87 hulls. Sir, 8,411. Sir, the hand was on the hilt. The hand had not had to find it. The hand found it 6 minutes too late. Sir, that is the citation. That is the line. 87 hulls. 8,411 names. 6 minutes. Sir, tell the deputy ambassador, when he is back from Kelvar, that I will be at the embassy this morning to make my report. I will sign whatever he asks me to sign. I will take whatever consequence the board asks me to take. The seal was used on my own authority, and against the ambassador's standing order. I will not, in my report, pretend otherwise. Yes, sir. Go. The deputy went. Veshentor sat at the small desk in the third room of the Halvik Chancery on Sendris, with the lamp out, and the cold cup at his elbow, and the Chancery's bitter tea untouched at the corner of the desk, and the grey morning of the tonner. The 15th of Carva rising in the shuttered window, and the long, quiet hum of the diplomatic quarter coming up under the morning bells. And he did not, in the next count of the long morning, move. After a long time he reached, with his outer fingers, for the cup of bitter tea. He set the cup down on the small ring of cup stains at the corner of the desk. He picked up the pen. He opened the small notepad. He began, in his own small, careful hand, to write the report. He wrote the date and the hour. He wrote the line of the cipher. He wrote the chain. He wrote the names. Eris Penn, Drest Valen, Maris, Corvain, Draka, Tren. He wrote, at the bottom of the page, in the small, careful hand of a third attaché of the Halvik Compact Embassy, who had used his seal at 4 hours and 21 of the morning against the standing order of his ambassador, the single line that would be the line of the report, and the line of the citation, and the line of the long count of the morning, and the line that the Concord, in the long count of the next week, would hear whether it wished to or not. The line read, "The warning was on the wire. It arrived 6 minutes too late. 87 hulls. 8,411. He blotted it. He folded the page. He set it in the inner pocket of his coat, against his ribs, where the seal had ridden through the dark. He stood up. He took his coat from the back of the chair. He buttoned it. He took the small gray woolen scarf from the desk and wound it once around his throat. He went down the front stair past Pell the night porter, who came to attention, and out into the colonnade. The gray morning had thinned to a cold, thin light. The curfew lamps were out. The rain had stopped. The diplomatic quarter was beginning the slow business of the morning. He turned left, toward the embassy, and walked the long colonnade in the cold, thin light, with the report folded against his ribs and the count of 8,411 in his head, and the 6 minutes against the inside of his skull, and the small, slow second hand of the dawn at frame 9, at long last, gone still. At the embassy gate, the Marine on duty came to attention. Veshin Tor returned the salute. He went in. He did not look back.